Well, it's a petrifying digital warning that every parent needs to hear. If you think your kids are addicted to their screens, you might be right. New research suggests now that technology is like digital heroin.
Okay, you got my attention. And they say that reliance on screens like that can damage the developing brain of a child the same way that drug addiction can. On the left, a brain scan of a drug addict, and on the right, a digital addict. So how do we fix this before it becomes a problem?
Dr. Nicholas Kardaras is an addiction expert and the author of Glow Kids, and he joins us now. Good morning. So you wrote a book about this.
Yes.
What do parents need to be worried or concerned about here?
I think it's a significant concern that I tried to write a book that really sort of gave parents the research, because I think a lot of parents intuitively understood that kids staring at glowing screens, and we've seen it. I think any of us that have lived on the planet for the last 10 years have seen the glow kids spreading. And I think a lot of parents had an intuitive sense that this might be a problem, but now we have both clinical and neurological brain imaging research, over 200 peer-reviewed studies that show that this has an addictive-like effect on a child.
Okay, word to the control room. If we could put up this brain scan screen again, just so that we can see what you're talking about.
Sure.
Explain what you're, okay, the person on the left is a drug addict.
Is an opiate addict. So that's a fractional anisotropy scan. It's diffuse tensor imaging MRIs. So just to kind of
try to make it as simple as possible.
Not to get too technical. What we're seeing is that we're seeing microstructural abnormalities that mirror drug addiction on the frontal cortex. So what we're seeing is
and the frontal cortex is
executive functioning, and it controls impulse control, and it correlates with ADHD and addiction.
All right, so when does it develop fully? When can we let our kids see our electronics or TV?
So the frontal cortex fully develops in their early 20s, but we know that as kids get older, they're more equipped to be able to handle what we call hyper-stimulating, hyper-arousing screens. It's clear that people that have been exposed to excessive, and I want to qualify by saying excessive screen usage meet all diagnostic criteria for behavioral addictions.
Right.
We know that addiction doesn't just mean substance addiction. It's not just drugs and alcohol, but people can be addicted to sex, and people can be addicted to gambling.
But no parent can wait 20 years. I mean, we're not going to wait 20 years to give our kid an iPad.
Well, Steve Jobs waited 10 years. I mean,
10 years, so 10's
Steve
more
Jobs
reasonable.
didn't let it. So our recommendation, and the research seems to show, is at least out of elementary school, that a child that's 8, 9, or 10 years old isn't neurologically equipped to handle such a stimulating, immersive product. We're just not made for it yet. There was one research study that showed that screens are as dopamine activating, and dopamine is a neurotransmitter that relates to addiction. They're as dopamine activating as sex. Do we want a 7-year-old having a digital orgasm? And that's how stimulating they are to a child.
Right, and you're talking about how when you play a game, you are constantly being stimulated because you want to get to the next level, and that's where the dopamine comes from. Not everybody agrees with you, Doctor. From The Verge, take a look at this quote. "We've seen this form of scaremongering before. People are frequently uneasy with new technology. After all, the problem is screens and computers aren't actually all that new." It's not the screen per se. It's the stimulation of what you do with the screen, right?
Right, and look, I write about in my book that Plato was against the written word. Plato thought that writing would erode our memory, because back then they used to do oral storytelling. I get it. I'm a kid that was raised in the 70s on Pac-Man, so I'm not anti-technology. I've got my smartphone, but we're seeing that this generation of technology is qualitatively different than prior technologies, and we're seeing, and primarily because of the interactive and immersive nature of it. So I'm not trying to be Chicken Little and say the sky's falling. I'm just trying to give parents the information that there are some potential clinical disorders that excessive screen usage can lead to, and the research is clear on that.
You know, my doctor said 2 years. My little girl was born 10 months ago, and he said, don't give her any iPads, no TV, nothing for 2 years. That's kind of the standard, what we hear.
That used to be the American Academy of Pediatrics used to recommend no screen time 2 or under. But again, what I could say is that Steve Jobs didn't let his kids have technology, that the top Yahoo and Silicon Valley engineers put their kids in non-tech Waldorf schools. So if the tech people are putting their kids in non-tech elementary schools, that should tell us something also.
So kids, go out and play. Go outside like we all used to do. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great, thank you.
His new book is called Glow Kids, something to think about.